Welcome, everybody. Just as a reminder, next weekend you're due the discussion board 3. Why can't a college be more like a firm? How higher educational organizations are distinct from other organizations. And remember, that's under discussion board prompts and also under discussion board resources. If you're looking at your screen, right above that, you will find this document. You'll find this document. And this is your resource. When it says Read Winston, I already have that resource for you under discussion board resources. So here's the article or the position paper that you should read in order for you to fill out your discussion board. As always, I'm not expecting you to write War and Peace next weekend. I don't want to take up all of your time because I want you to be working, and working doesn't mean that you're always producing a product. I want you to be working. Jade called me this week, and I was so glad to get her call that, number one, she's still with us, but number two, and that's working. She's been thinking about what her passion, her bliss is in terms of what she would like to do and what direction she'd like this program to take her in her career. And then she's going to start looking for a business or an organization to do it in. And this is more of those kind of think things to try to get you to find your thoughts about what you want to do. And you may apply that to your own organization once you're through this program. But remember, look for something other than where you work, outside of your organization, and look for something not in your church. And so this is in that path or help you to develop your thoughts and ideas about what your passion is, what you want to do. So that's next week's assignment. All right. And so it's discussion board number 3. All right. So that's all. So today we're doing a case of wine, and here are all of the materials that I gave you. First one was how to analyze a case study, the presentation directions, the example, the rubric reflection example, and then the actual case study. And I hope you kind of read them in that order. I didn't tell you had to. Some people like to read that, but for me, I work backwards. I'm not the engineer that Bruce is, but how I try to come to what works for me is to reverse engineering things. What's it going to look like in the end? What am I supposed to be doing with it before I get? It helps me clarify as I read the case study or read the project directions that I'm in. It helps me clarify what's important when I read. That's just a little hint that I have for you, and so going forward, whatever works for you is fine. I set it up specifically this way because this is the way that I would do it, not that you have to do it that way, but it helps give me clarity. If I just read the case study first, I'm just all over the place. And part of what DEOL is supposed to do is help you define your thoughts and put you on a path, and kind of that's the way I did this. So this morning, we're ready to get started with your presentations. I don't want to keep you all day, so who's going to be our first host and presenter? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the host, and what's on your screen is what everybody will see on theirs, just like what's on mine. So who has the opening presentation of the morning? Don't everybody talk at once.
I guess we can go first. I don't know how to share a screen though. This is my second time using Zoom.
just make sure that your PowerPoint is up on your screen.
Well, I don't know how to do that.
I can do it, Lori. Just
Okay.
Dr.
Okay.
Lamb, just give me access and I'll do it.
I will do that. I'm gonna make you the host. I'm changing the host to Bruce back. All right, so now it should take a second. On your screen, Bruce, do you see new share in the little box?
Let's see. I see a little box, but I don't see. No, can you see my screen at this time?
No. You may have to click on new share. On the screen that you can you see my control panel box that has mute, stop video participants?
No, I can't.
All right.
Okay, here it is.
Are you controlling my screen or your screen?
I think I'm controlling your screen.
All right. Okay. Normally when I make you the host, your screen pops up. All right, I've reclaimed host.
Yep.
I am going to make you the host again.
Okay, it says I'm now the host.
All right. So you should have a box that allows you to do new share.
I'm looking for new share. I don't see new share. I see share screen, but I don't see.
Yeah, that's you.
Okay.
That's you.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
There we go. We now see your screen. Cleveland Community College, a case of wine. There you go. There we go.
Okay, are we ready?
We're ready.
Lori, ready?
Yep, ready.
David?
Yes.
All right, Bruce, you want to just go through the first few slides and then we'll take it from there? You want to do like 4 slides each?
That's fine. We can, that's fine. We can do it that way.
Okay.
So we started out, of course, with a case of wine and assessing the organizational culture at Resolute Winery, Bruce Metcalf, and David Forster. So what we noticed that this was the organizational chart. Mr. Main was the owner, and then you had Jillian, who was responsible for Diane and Ann, and then you had Diane, who had the responsibility of Mary and Paul, and of course you had Bob, which we never saw Bob in the story, but he's on the organization chart, who responsible for Charles. And we noticed that with this being a small organization, this created some problems with this type of hierarchy in the culture of the organization. We did a comparison between Resolute and the River Creek Winery. This is just some of the things that we stated. On the Resolute side, it was a small organization. They had 5 employees, 2 managers for that organization. They had more customer traffic. They charged $6 for a sample, for glass to sample the wine. 1 duty per employee with very specific job duties. They had one that had to have the responsibility of pouring, or had to get permission or get someone else to pour the wine for them. They gave a very small amount of wine, 1 ounce or less wine. However, they did have an award-winning wine, and we felt like that they had overly layered on the organizational chart, but they had some history and some family tradition as compared to the River Creek Winery. Laura, you want to take over, or David?
Sure, I can do it. So basically the facts of the case, Mr. Main inherited the family winery. It was 3 generations. He's the only family member that's left in the winery. So now there are employees from outside. There's Mr. Main and then 8 outsiders plus the seasonal workers. The recent trend it talked about at the beginning of the article was that the sales are decreasing, although production is increasing. They talked about where the customers come from. 50% of the customers are customers that come in and are the repeat visitors, where the other 50% are first time. They come in from a travel guide or word of mouth or stuff like that. Mr. Main has tried several strategies to help increase sales. He's done the Employee of the Month. We get to that later on in the presentation, but he's tried several things and nothing has worked. So we have an idea later on of what he thinks the problem is, but right now he's frustrated. He's frustrated with the loss of sales, and he's frustrated that the family feel is now gone from the winery. The learning objectives for the case, We have several of these on a couple of slides. The lack of training, we think, is a big deal. The lack of trust for the employees. There is a high staff turnover. He talks about how he thinks that the employees are leaving because they don't have a good work ethic. There is, one of the things he tried was a complaint suggestion box, which later on we say he just dismissed that. There's a lack of family atmosphere, although family is part of the history and mission. The consultant asked at one point, what is the mission statement? And he read a saying that was from his grandfather that was talking about, just the family history. Examples of, one of the things with the learning objectives is what are the subtle clues? Mary rolling her eyes when she's explaining why she can't pour. She was saying this to the consultant when she thought the consultant was just a customer, that she pours too much. So anyone that wanted some wine, then Mary would have to ask Diane to pour. The manager's watching over the employees, telling them what to do. And Mr. Main, we think, has the same feeling as the employees. He's disengaged, and one clue of that is how he keeps canceling the monthly meetings. I realize, classmates, that I need to be, my dog is barking, I apologize. I need to be next time in a confined room, so that will happen. You want to do this one, David?
Sure. The learning objectives of the case, to engage the client and to develop a data gathering strategy is what Dr. Michaels had employed in this case, since Mr. Main had asked her to do so. With the observations of daily happenings, it was noted that none of the clerks knew who she was when she was originally observing them and what she was hired to do. So her efforts essentially were anonymous to them. When she did make observations, only the managers greeted her, not any of the staff greeted her when she was there on site. Diane did need a new case of wine, and she was required to get Jillian's authorization to do so. So we get into the issue of a strong hierarchy in the organization, and instead what they needed to approach was more of a cross-training approach and to make all employees feel like they were valued. Instead, Diane felt like she was belittled. Jillian spent most of her time observing Mary and Ann. In other words, she didn't actively involve herself on the floor management to assist Mary and Ann. Instead, she was, I guess you could say, taking a distant approach and not actively participating. And in regard to observations of company meetings that Dr. Michaels made, as we mentioned earlier, the meeting was canceled for a lack of an agenda, so it was unorganized, and on a regular basis they were not meeting. So there wasn't anything productively happening from the guidance from Mr. Main. Everyone at the table, when they had a board meeting, were assigned seats, and the assigned seats were in the form of the hierarchy. So when Dr. Michaels attended herself, she was asked to move to a different seat because that didn't fit into the hierarchy. So that one of the issues is that they're very hierarchical, and they don't seem to be willing at the moment to break that process. And that makes the staff feel like they're not valued, and they're always in that role of who's higher on the org chart. Bob and Jillian, they did not get along in the case, so there was conflict between the two. The meeting lasted just for 25 minutes, and in that way, there wasn't a lot of detail and anything productive that happened. Ann and Diane, they were not interested in the meeting. Only one person brought anything to write with the meeting, so it wasn't as if the staff members came there thinking it was going to be productive and they had to write things down and that there was going to be an action plan that they took out of the meeting. Instead, they were distant and aloof and not interested. And Mary was afraid to ask a question, so she didn't actively participate. And only the managers tasted the wine, was a reflection from the meeting. In other words, staff were not even valued enough to taste the wine, but they were asked to describe the wine to customers, which they said was hard to do if they hadn't tasted it. So again, getting back to the issue that they were belittled. with learning objectives of individual interviews. The individual interviews that Dr. Michaels made, they were conducted on a Likert scale. Each employee was given also a separate situation where they could come in and take 10 words. They originally started with a list of 50 words. They trimmed it down to 10 words that were associated with the business, then got down to 5, and then 3, and then 1. But nobody in the process really, except for Mr. Main, focused on the word family. So he had a disconnect from what everybody else had in the organization, and that he thought it was a family-related business, and nobody else working for him really did. There was a revised customer survey that took place by Dr. Michael. She did elicit more feedback by having open-ended questions. The initial feedback came back with good results for the business. She wanted to get into more depth, so she asked open-ended questions just to get feedback in that way, which was a good strategy from her. And to analyze the data and make recommendations to a client, focus on a family there's a disconnect with that. So we've thought about the idea of focus on the family would be important because that is part of the mission statement. More of a group feeling with everyone being valued in the organization equally, getting out of their issue of having a strong hierarchical organization, making the organization more fun. Compared to the other business in the early part of the case, the other business had a better atmosphere and a feel for the clients as opposed to this business did not. So the idea of making it more fun, more lively, a nicer atmosphere is something we looked at as a recommendation. The overall satisfaction for customer service. Customer service is lacking and not smooth, and there needs to be cross-training that takes place. And just a friendlier environment so the customers will feel more at ease. All recommendations that we looked at. And related to the data, to analyze it, there were observations that took place, employee interviews and customer surveys, all made by Dr. Michaels that I've referred to. Would somebody else like to pick up?
Okay. Some other learning objectives of the case in analyzing the data and making recommendations. We felt a need to redefine the organizational chart, maybe create more of a flatter hierarchy chart than what they actually currently existed. A need to cross-train workers. All employees should be able to assist customers, particularly during high demand. But other than that, they should actually be able to have that cross-training so that they can keep business going. The customer service piece was lacking there. Felt like that there was no need for parking spots. You had 3 employees, and actually when they got there, they were the only cars. When Dr. Michaels arrived, they were the only cars that were there, and they had their own parking spots. The presence of Mr. Main in the winery, which would get him engaged and add to that personal family feel, so he could tell the story about the winery to the customers, and allowing all employees to taste the wine and to provide incentives to employees to submit their ideas to improve the business is another recommendation. And our position here is Mr. Main believes that the problem with declining sales is due to young workers' attitude and their work ethic. In fact, the problem is with an overly layered organizational chart that's creating an environment where all employees don't feel valued.
You want me to jump in? Okay, so evaluation is that the cost to solve the problem is minimal, the cost in the time. The probability of success for our proposal to work is moderate. It really depends upon Mr. Main's ability to have a big picture, a broad lens, to see that he has created a group dynamic because of the overly layered organizational chart. That chart has created a hierarchy where there are some employees that have, they feel like they have all the power, and there are other ones that just feel like it's a job. The level of support will be the highest among the non-managers when there's a change in the organizational chart. There's managers will not like getting rid of their parking spot or their role as telling people what to do. So it's very important on how this is presented. So the values to be signaled are back to family values. That's what Mr. Main wants. He doesn't, at some point in the article, he talks about how he feels like it's a job now. It's not fun for him to go to work anymore. It really feels like work. He wants it to have that family value again. So getting back to the family values, at some point, he didn't understand why people did not come to the Christmas party, and they were like, why would we come? It would be another day of work. So getting back to, we enjoy this, we're part of this winery, and we would want to be at the company Christmas party. Mr. Main desires to get back to that family feeling, to have a successful winery, and it's evident by his attempts at solving the problem. So they talk about several different things that he did to solve the problem. I read about the fish philosophy after I read this article, and it's very interesting about how that fish philosophy was developed, and there's a documentary about it. So I'm hoping to watch it. But basically, where employees are happy at work, they are enjoying it. The background is the person who was walking down the street and saw these people throwing fish and enjoying that process. So Mr. Main put some of that philosophy into the winery, did not work. He started an Employee of the Month program, which I thought, I almost chuckled when I read this, which was he just drew a name randomly. He did not do it by incentive or did not do it by production. Who's selling the most or in any type of system, he just drew a name randomly, and that was the Employee of the Month. So that's meaningless. The complaint suggestion box, there was only one complaint, and he just dismissed it, and that person is no longer with the winery. So he kind of thought, well, they wanted to move up too quick. That's ridiculous. They didn't put their time in. So that complaint suggestion box, just like the Employee of the Month, meaningless, useless. And then the customer satisfaction survey, he thought was good, but it wasn't specific enough for real data analysis. So that's our evaluation.
So in terms of a plan for implementation, the risk involved for the loss of managers when a flattened organization is introduced. So in a flatter organization, the managers would have less of a hierarchical control, I guess we could say, compared to where they are currently. But this is something the organization does need, is to be a flatter organization where everybody is valued. The presentation of new charts should be part of a team building day that introduces a new philosophy for the business. The team building will be led by a consultant or someone else from the organization outside the organization who's got big pictures and goals. So they do need to really strategize and go much past their, I guess you could say, cursory attempts of having meetings. And instead, they really need to organize as an entity and focus based off their mission statement and develop new philosophies and goals for the organization. Team members can be part of building that new philosophy. Everybody needs to be involved all the way down to the bottom of the org chart as it's currently established. A flatter organization chart will help build better equity and an employee's sense of ownership and pride in their work, and it will no longer be just a job. That's a major focus of where they need to be, and trying to engage all the employees and make them feel like they're valued, and that will help also deal with their issue of staff turnover and training that's associated with bringing in new employees all the time. The employees will have a buy-in and will be valued as part of the system, as a solution. And also in terms of plan for implementation, they can put in performance-based incentives. So for example, an incentive system for those on the floor that sell more wine, they can get a performance-based incentive. In other words, give them motivation to excel. And that's not built into their system currently.
Excellent.
I think that's the last slide. Yes.
Okay. Questions? All right. All right. Excellent job. Now I'm going to run through, and I'm going to type it on the screen as we go. And you tell me if I have encapsulated your presentation. And that was to sell wine. Is that correct?
We can hardly hear you, Dr. Land.
Correct. The organizational mission is to sell wine. Can we all agree on that? And the problem that he has is production is up and sales are down. So, but his mission in this winery is to sell wine. All right, and so his organizational theory is it should be done in a family orientation. Is that correct? That's what he desires, the leader of the organization. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Spell that right in a minute. Hierarchy. That disconnected. He wants a family orientation, but his organization is not flat. It's hierarchical. All right. Find that as his primary objective. Primary. All right. That leads us to organizational culture. And it's dysfunctional because the employees have no buy-in, they have no engagement, they have no cross-training. That accurate?
Correct.
All right. All right. Again, which leads to organizational behavior, which is no engagement, which leads to organizational effectiveness, which is non-existent. That summarize your presentation?
it was hard to hear you.
Does what I have on the screen, does that summarize your, my volume is down.
I see the weekly schedule on the screen. Is that what you guys see? Mm-hmm.
There we go. Do you see it now?
Yes. Let's see.
All right. Does that summarize your presentation? Now, it's just, these are major bullets here.
Yes.
All right. So what we see here in terms of our organization, in terms of organizational leadership, what you were supposed to draw from this, and you did very well, is that mission, that each of these is supported, that there is a hierarchy here in organizations of how things have to work. Your mission, you have to clearly define what that is, and he wanted to sell wine, but his organizational theory was in a family orientation, but his structure prevented that from happening and made his culture dysfunctional. The behavior of the participants was not what you wanted, and so he had no organizational effectiveness. Now, you filled in all the gaps. These are just the big ideas. The point that I want you to see here is how all of these things work in combination. And when you get one of them out of line with the one prior to them, each of these sets the organization on its path. And if you get one of these out of place, the last one ends up being you have no organizational effectiveness. He wanted a family orientation in his organizational theory, but he set his structure up hierarchical. He can't be successful after that. And so when we look at those organizational charts, we wonder, why are we looking at this stuff? Why does this matter? It makes all the difference. He set his organization up for failure in his organizational structure. It did not support his organizational theory nor his organizational mission. And so his culture became dysfunctional. They didn't get along. They rolled their eyes. The interpersonal relationships were bad. They had personal inter relationships, but they were bad. Sometimes none at all is better than them being bad. They didn't like one another. They couldn't work together. And so nobody took any ownership. That's what no engagement means in trying to support the mission of selling wine. And so he has an ineffective organization. And you're exactly right. And when you went to your suggestions, first thing he's going to have to do is he's going to have to restructure his organization. He's going to have to make it flatter rather than hierarchical if he wants that family orientation, if he wants his culture to be where people get along, and if he wants organizational behaviors to be those of engagement. That's what he's going to have to do. So you hit exactly on his first problem is he must change his organizational structure. He can't change his mission. He's not in it for the good of the group. He's got to sell wine to keep the doors open. So my question to you is, does he need the family orientation?
I think he could make it a family feel. That's part of the history and tradition. So he could make it.
That's exactly right. He can't really get away from that. That's the history and the tradition. And that's part and parcel of the wine business. He's not selling something that's, part of why you sell wine is history and tradition. That's important in that business. That is one of those tent poles of that business. If he did away with that, he would just be competing on the open market with the big bottlers, with the corporate wine business. In what he's doing in a small family winery, it has to be a small family winery. So he can't change the first two. So we can't change the mission, we can't change the theory. So we have to start with the structure. And as you folks pointed out, that's where he's got to start. Now, there's a lot of moving parts in that, cross-training, and you listened them effectively, you did a great job. the point to remember here is, as you kind of go down, this is how it has. You have to look at your mission first, then your theory, then does that structure support those two? And that will define your culture. Culture defines behavior. Behavior defines effectiveness. That's the way it works in all organizations. And you folks define that clearly. So y'all understood what you were to do. You did it well. But this is one of those things that this is the way it works in all organizations. This is the pattern that you will need to keep in mind always, or the process that you have to keep. I told you I'm a big plans and process person. You have to be in organizations. You can't pull one of these out and say that doesn't matter, or we can ignore that, or we can do something different there. No, it all has to fit together. It all has to fit together, and if one of these is off, they'll all be off. But it goes mission, theory, structure, culture, behavior, effectiveness. That's just, you have to work it in that order. And you folks did that very well. So you didn't learn it from me, but you learned it somewhere, so that's all that matters. Excellent, excellent, excellent. I can't be more pleased. Very good. All right. Moving right along. Who's going to be the host now?
Jay, do you want me to go ahead and I just present and go through?
Sure.
All right, I've made Brandon the host. Brandon, you should have a share screen popping up here just in a second.
Okay.
There we go.
And Brandon, we're still going to go in our order, like we talked about.
Yes. Oh, that's good. All right.
All right. So I'm going to get started. Jade, Brandon, and myself analyzed this case study, a case of wine, assessing the organizational culture at Resolute Winery. So the facts of the case, you have Dr. Michaels, who is the consultant that was hired to come in and assess the organization. You have Conrad Main, who is the owner of the Resolute Winery, which is also his family business. Julian and Bob are the managers, and then the other employees just have different roles within the organization. The two places that were in the case study, you have the Resolute Winery, which is the winery in question, and then River Creek Winery is in close proximity to Resolute Winery, and that's where Dr. Michaels stopped on her way in. Okay. All right, so the problems identified in the case study were slow sales over the past several years, despite their good production. They have had an increase in employee turnover, especially among their entry-level staff, and those are mostly the younger people, so they come in, they train them, they leave. Mr. Main also says that they have no family feel like there has been in the past. That's very important to him. And then lastly, there is the low employee satisfaction. Next slide. So since Dr. Michaels visited the River Creek Winery on her way in, she was able to compare the two. So we have a comparison, a tale of two wineries. You have River Creek Winery, which has the open floor plan, very welcoming, made conversation very easy. You had 3 employees working who were very friendly, very helpful. They were able to rotate their responsibilities. They could work cash register, they could pour the wine, they could stock, so they had multiple responsibilities. And at this winery, she was also able to get free samples. She sampled 4, but there was not a limit. She could have sampled more. So then at Resolute Winery, when she arrived, it is a smaller layout. There were 5 employees working. They all seemed to be busy. There was plenty of customers there. They did charge for samples here in a roundabout way. So she had to buy a souvenir glass, and then she was able to get her 4 free samples, which were not really free. She noticed that there was no teamwork here, and there was some confusion with who was responsible for what. The culture at the winery seemed to be very customer focused. They wanted the customer to have a positive experience and to come back. That was their goal. He did put in a suggestion box. Some customers responded to that, and the results were positive there. So they felt like they were doing a good job on that. Let's see. They also relied on word of mouth referrals. That seemed has decreased since what they used to have. They don't get as many word of mouth referrals anymore. The employee culture at the winery is not the family feel that Mr. Main desires. He tried to remedy the poor employee satisfaction by implementing the employee of the month, but that didn't go over well. It was just handpicked. There was no incentive. You didn't have to do anything to be employee of the month. You just worked there, and you got your name on a plaque or your face on a plaque. So that didn't go over well with some of the employees. There also seems to be a lack of trust in the abilities of the entry-level staff. They're very micromanaged. He tried the FISH philosophy, which teaches the steps to take to make your workplace better, for people to want to work there. And then the hierarchical structure, or his organizational chart, it seems to be important to Mr. Main, but that could be part of his problem. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Okay, next slide. All right, so Dr. Michaels began her data gathering by just observing the company. She made an unannounced visit. She came in just like she was a customer so that she could get the true customer experience and really evaluate the organizational climate. She observed their daily routines, so observed even the parking lot and where people were parking, how you were greeted when you came in. She also was able to sit in on a company meeting. She gathered lots of data there, was able to observe a lot of things there. She collected new data through individual interviews with the employees. She was able to do customer surveys and employee surveys so that she could get their input on what they felt. Okay. So when she was looking at analyzing the environment, the employee said that there's a lack of family feel. But the actual physical and the social environment really lends itself to a family feel. It's small. It used to be a family business. So if all the parts are working together, there really could be that family feel for the employees. He has a great market. He's in wine country. He has a great product that has won awards. His branding is good. So he has a good product to market. The resources that he has probably are not being used appropriately. The employees are not valued for their expertise. The structure of the organization is not very purposeful. And then the customers and the employee feedback is really not taken to heart and really not taken into consideration. Okay, so now we're going to move into impressions, and I think Jade's going to take over.
This is just looking a little more in depth at the impressions that Dr. Michaels kind of walked away with while she was still performing her anonymous visits. At River Creek, she really saw employees sharing tasks and engaged in the mission and the vision of the winery. It really seems to run like a well-oiled machine, and there's an understanding that the goals of the organization will lead to the success of the organization. And everyone was taking care of the details, which will also increase the success of the organization. I think it was also important to note that the employees at River Creek, they really knew the product, so they were able to guide the customer or inform the customer as they came in, and they had any questions or preferences, they were able to really direct those customers to what they were looking for. The use of the local products showed a support for the community and also lended itself to be able to create businesses for other local entities. And the customer service was top notch. So I think that with River Creek, you came in, you went through their process, but you also kind of left feeling like you were part of the family, which was what Resolute is really trying to achieve. In the Resolute Winery, there were more customers, and maybe at the surface level, the employees seemed busy, but As you kind of go through the case study, you see people off task, not spending time doing what they were supposed to be doing. And in terms of the pouring procedure, well, if everyone is not able to pour, then actually everyone's not busy or doing their job. They had to pay, customers have to pay to enjoy a limited number of samples, and a discontent of the employee, you know, Mary very readily and like provides the first impression of this as she shows her discontent for not being able to pour items when Dr. Michaels is there. And then you have lacking customer service. If everyone that's on the floor can't pour, then you have customers that are sitting there waiting for their product. And it's also kind of a sad note that Dr. Michaels could tell that the employees really were not interested. They were just kind of, in a way, playing nice when they were going through the motions to say, you know, well, did you enjoy your wine, or how was your day? It kind of very disingenuous comments, or trying to attempt to start conversations with the customers. And then you have suspicious or mistrusting employees, especially when Dr. Michaels asked for Mr. Main. But I kind of also question, is it suspicious and mistrusting employees, or are they also there and as kind of like a gatekeeper to maybe keep people away from Mr. Main? And that's probably something that he has created in the culture of the organization. So upon meeting with Mr. Main and talking with him and getting some feedback from him, just some questions that came to our mind were, well, how do you know that the customers respond to the road signs? How do you know that the travel guides or word of mouth actually work? And why do the people not want to come back? Why is personnel turnover so high? Why do the employees not want to attend the company celebrations? And are the roles defined based on the organizational chart? And why can't the winery keep hold of younger staff? And I think maybe to answer some of these questions is to make sure that he's really employing some surveys or some interviews that are really geared towards the audience that they're designed to target, and maybe not kind of just make assumptions that aren't based on some data or more refined research into really what's going on in the organization. So some things that Mr. Main has attempted, and kind of went back even when the first consultant came in, he was the institution of the hierarchy, the tried institution of new policies and procedures, which eventually they took hold, but even Mr. Main mentioned how difficult it was for those new policies to come in and be rolled out. He's instituted the complaint suggestion box, which he received one feedback on, but no action was taken. You have the employee of the month, which really has no value or incentives or awards for the employee because of the fact that it is a random selection. And then your customer satisfaction survey, based on the Likert scale, well, you aren't going to get any in-depth feedback from those customers if you're not asking those open-ended type questions. And two, if you would open it up more than you to be able to give customers an honest feedback, then you would be able to trace the possibility of some trends that could help you really design a process for getting back to the family feel of the winery. And then you have your customer service programs, lack of employee understanding. You know, does what you're trying to institute actually fit the organization? And then you see no follow through from the top down. So some data gathering from Dr. Michaels. First is her daily observations in the parking lot, and just seeing how the leadership has parking spots, kind of again promotes this idea of an us versus them, you know, hierarchy versus the other employees working in the organization. There's no greetings by the employees. It's just a leadership person that greets the customers as they come in. Mr. Main as a leader, he's not visible. He's not walking through the store. He's not engaging with customers. He really has taken kind of like a back seat in a way, or really wants to not be seen. There's no trust among the employees. And again, we come back to this pouring ritual question. Why wasn't the employee who they believe is employing too much, why wasn't she retrained? And even almost to the point, well, if you have a job task but you can't complete that job, then why are you still there? And then everything has to be channeled through Bob or Julian, and then to the point that they are willing to lose money or lie to the customer because of the policy that's instituted that a leadership person is the only one who can go back and bring new wine up to the front. You know, you're willing to say, oh no, we're out of that, but your cellar really could be stocked full. And then you have upper level management not willing to help lower level, and employees are not being asked to get back on task. Sorry, as evident with the employee who's playing on the BlackBerry while other customers are at the counter waiting to be helped. And then there's no value placed on the employee's expertise in the products for selling. When Diane says, you know, no one's asked me, but we don't need this type of display. We're always running out of napkins. So she really knows what the customers are coming in and what they need, but no one has asked her for that input.
All right. So then we continue on with the gathering for Dr. Michaels. The staff meeting informations, you know, they were frequently canceled. No agenda items. Everyone comes in, and these are some things that we were wanting to talk about. The assigned seating, you know, when they were saying, well, this is so-and-so seat, just kind of, oh, you need to move. So Dr. Michaels actually ended up moving. And so going back to that hierarchical organizational structure that they have in place, only the upper level were providing input and didn't value the employees or ask their feedback of how things are going, what's going on the floor. So they just didn't have any input there. Then when they brought out, when Mr. Main presented the new wine, you know, he just assumed that that it would taste better, or that it's going to be a bestseller based on his input. Didn't provide training or a flavor profile for the employees. So it wasn't until someone asked, hey, can we try this? That it prompted, you know, that's an afterthought. Yeah, well, let's do that tomorrow. But this is a meeting that would be something you want to discuss and make sure that they're kind of getting that same essence of the wine, the flavor profile, to be able to relate that to their customer base. So individual interviews, everyone had their own concept of the business, of what family means, because again, that's what Mr. Kane wants everyone to be able to recognize as their identity for his winery, but everyone had their own feel. The family focus was pretty much gone, and the environment was not a fun place for them to be. With the customer survey, it was limited questions, going back to what Jade was informing on the Likert scale. So they were just a scaled answer. Needed more insight from the added questions. Customers preferred the other wineries. The experience that they felt upon entering that climate, you could definitely tell, was a friendlier, more fun, and better atmosphere for the customer engagement. So some of the recommendations: you need to have interaction with the customers. Mr. Kane needs to be visible, and some of the upper management, they could be mingling with customers. We even thought about offering specials. I think we even mentioned maybe even a wine club, to where, you know, you purchase so many things, or, you know, or there's a new wine come out. If you're in that wine club, you could get a new bottle sent directly to you. The mission statement needs to be developed. When Dr. Michaels was walking with Mr. Kane and she asked about that, he kind of referenced to a quote. It necessarily wasn't a mission statement about wine. So it needs to be a really developed mission statement that's displayed, and that have the employees to know it. And if they know it and they're believing in the winery, they're going to eventually live it as well, because you're going to experience that as a customer coming in. You're going to say, wow, this is a really a great family environment. You can tell that it's family oriented, which goes directly back to the mission statement. Again, engaging, interactive way for customers to provide feedback. You want to have those incentives for returning, because that's where they saw the decline in the sales. Employee of the month, employee recognition, clearly a defined method is going to be more beneficial than just randomly selecting someone, kind of like a drop in the hat, or you're just picking out a name out of a hat, and then providing them incentives. It could be that you have employee signage, parking, the employee of the month, or, incentives for their sales. All employees given an active role in the monthly meeting. Come back, provide some feedback. What are your recommendations? Or did something work or not work? Standard employment application, just kind of having that standard interview questionnaire that's gonna give feedback as into what is your purpose coming on board into our family organization, family-based organization. You want to have that evaluation for the employee and as well as the employer. And then training, you want to cross-train your employees so that way they can do multiple jobs. Going back to the example of pouring of the wine, Jaden noted they should have retrained her in how to pour. If they're not meeting the standard that's set through the company, let's retrain, make sure that you're able to do your job efficiently, and avoid micromanaging. They can't do their job because they feel like their management is hovering or micromanaging every little detail that they're doing, having to ask permission for someone else to come and pour a glass of wine to a customer. Make sure you're having product awareness. And this also ties back to that employment application, cultivation and harvesting of the grapes. If, you might want to hire a horticulturist, someone who's understanding the growth of wine, cultivating and harvesting. That's great points also to talk to when customers arrive and they're sampling different wines. They know that they have award-winning wines, the flavor profiles that are coming with them, and along with pairing recommendations. Then, of course, what I mentioned before, order packages or wine clubs. You could do a winter selection or a spring collection. If you're part of that wine club, that's going to increase those sales to bring more people back to that organization and want to have that experience again. And then if an employee leaves, you want to have an exit interview and open-ended questions and kind of taking their feedback to figure out, well, what can we do for other employees who may join our team? And so some of the risks that we thought of as far as a non-implementation, you're going to continue to have high employee turnover. And our goal is to keep some of those employees with our company and continue to train them. Continued decline of ongoing returning sales. That's one of the primary factors that was a concern for Mr. Main. And so we want to make sure that we increase those sales and get people to come back. And if they continue to decline, it could have a potential closure from the loss of revenue, the loss of the organizational identity. If we don't implement these changes, that family field is going to be completely gone. And that's what we're wanting to focus there. And then declining employee morale, which also ties back into the high employee turnover. I believe that's it.
Very good. Very good. I like hiring the horticulturalist for brand differentiation. I thought that was a great idea. That's what you have to do in a small business. You can't compete with the big guys on other ways. That's a good point to make. All right. Let's see now. All right. So we went through organizational mission, theory, structure, culture, behavior, effectiveness. All right. The job that Dr. Michaels was hired to do and the job that I ask you to do has a name where you go in and assess. It's a process of assessment of an organization. here's the final exam for this Saturday. As soon as you get this, we'll be done. You'll get to go back to the rest of your lives. Especially its culture, primarily its culture, and that's how it functions. That process is known as organizational what?
I only heard part of your question.
All right. If you look on the screen, the process of quantifying an organization and its culture, which is what, basically the output effectiveness, but of quantifying that organization, the process, what Dr. Michaels was asked to do and what you were asked to do was to quantify that organization through a process. That's known as organizational what?
Analyzation.
Climate. We too often mistakenly interchange culture and climate. Culture is what is. Climate is a process of evaluation. That's the takeaway from today, that all of these things that you see on the screen climate. So when you're asked to go in and assess an organization, or when you go in and assess an organization, do a needs assessment, do qualitative work where you observe like Dr. Michaels did, interview, what you're trying to assess is the overall climate of the organization. And you have to start with its mission, organizational theory, its structure, its culture, its behavior, and its effectiveness. All of those things are part and parcel of the organizational climate. And climate portends an assessment. Culture does not. Culture is part of that. But too many times, when we start out as organizationalists, we mistakenly interchange culture and climate. Climate is a process that you go through as the organizationalist to determine what the culture is and that therefore its effectiveness. I know that sounds like that's semantics, but it's not. Always when you hear climate, think of that's a process. And that's what I'm going to be doing when I go into my capstone project, my consultancy. When I pair with my organization, first thing I'm going to do is a needs assessment or a program evaluation or one of those things. We're going to engage in that. What you're doing is climate work. And that trigger should trigger in your mind, oh, climate, I have to look at all of these things. I have to start with the mission, the theory, the structure, the culture, the behavior, and the effectiveness. That all of those things are a process. That you don't just come in. Too many times, folks just come in when they think of climate. They just come in and look at the culture. There's four things before that influence that culture. That if all you do is come in and look at the culture, you may not have an understanding of why it is the way it is. You've got to go back and start with mission, as Brandon was talking about. You got to go back. It starts with mission, then goes to theory, the organizational theory, then the structure, then culture, then behavior, then effectiveness. It has to go in that order. And climate, if you'll remember this from today, climate encompasses is a process. You can Google it if you don't believe me. Climate is a process. I actually did it for you, and I'll read what it says. Organizational climate, sometimes known as corporate climate, is the process of quantifying the culture of the organization, and it precedes the notion of organizational culture. That's what I mean. You have to start up there at mission. Right there, Google. This is one of the good uses of Google, not for research. But as a emerging organizationalist, please understand that climate is a process. It's not a thing. It is a professional process that you're going to learn to employ. It's not to be mistaken for culture. It is this process that you went through today. And that's why we started with this one, because it is a perfect example of the process that you would go through to assess organizational climate. I hope that you enjoyed this one. I hope that you learned something from this one. I hope it makes you think. what you did through this one is what you do as an organizationalist. Now, I've tried to make it practical and real, but you always need to relate it back to theory, just like today. In the end, organizational climate, the theory is it's a process. It's not random. It's not to be mistaken for culture. Climate is a process that you go through. And that's the takeaway from today's lesson, is learning the process of assessing climate. And that it starts and goes through these steps that are on my whiteboard here now. Questions about today? Concerns, comments? Did you learn anything? Did you like doing this? Did you hate it? What can we do better in the future? Don't everybody talk at once.
I just have a question about the reflection.
Yes.
Are you wanting the reflection before we present, or are you wanting the reflection after we present?
After. Because I want you to go back and think now.
Okay.
That's why I've summarized this and kind of give you a leg up on where you ought to start your reflection here.
Okay. So I've submitted mine, so can you delete it so I can?
You can add, subtract. I mean, if you've already gotten one written, that's great. You can go back and revisit if you've already written one, you can revisit it. But reflection is what you got, not what I'm trying to give you. Reflection is what you got out of this. I'm just giving you some food for thought here at the end and giving you the rationale for why we did this. You may not have gotten this out of that, and that's fine. But hopefully each time we meet and talk about one of these, I won't be the only one that says, oh, I understand why we did this, or, oh, I didn't know that, or, wow, during this, I learned that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some of those things will emerge during the 4 times that we meet the next 3 times that we meet to go through these. But yeah, you should have some organization, some takeaways already in your mind. You may have already put them down. And they may be about these specific things that's on the boards. They may speak to one or more of those. But the big picture here is what we just did was what's commonly known as a climate survey. And don't think that fits somewhere in this. It is this. It starts with mission. Climate is the process. It's not one of these things on the board here. Students get sidetracked into that sometimes and don't understand, oh, climate's not just one of these things. It is all of these things. And when you're asked to assess or evaluate an organization, it's all of these things. It's not, too many times we mistake climate for culture, and that's the only thing we look at. Nope, it's a process. It starts with mission. And that's what today's takeaway, that's what you were supposed to learn, what I was supposed to teach you, or you were supposed to learn about today. So hopefully in the end, that's what you get, is understanding that it's a process. It's a specific set of skills. It's not random. It's not just incidental learning, that there's a process that you go through to assess the climate of an organization. Okay.
I had a question as well. So,
yes.
So now that we've gone through this, we're uploading a link from this video as well.
Make sure that what you would do is you can upload this to YouTube and create a link. If you have a Gmail account, I'm going to upload this one. Or if you don't have one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload it as soon as we get through, and I will send you the link, and you can just upload the link. That's always easier than you going through that problem. But yes, I will send you. It'll be about an hour and 15 minutes before it has to process, and then it takes. We've been at it for about 75 minutes, so it'll take about an hour and a half, about 90 minutes. I will have you a lot. I'll send you the link, but it won't be live until about noon probably. But you can take that link when I send it to you, and that's what you drop in the Dropbox is the link that I send you.
Okay.
I do that. And then I'll also post that link under the tab that says Case Study 1. I'll also post the link there. So if you want to go back and view it yourself, or somebody else wanted to come along and see it, it will be there as our reference. But yes, this recording will be, a link to it will be put under case study 1, the tab on the menu. But I will send you the link, and then you can upload that link in Blackboard in that Dropbox.
And we also upload our PowerPoint in Dropbox, right?
Yeah, you can do that. That is correct. You can do that. You can have the link, the PowerPoint, and your 2-pager. That all goes in Dropbox. That is correct. Okay, we're catching on to the process. Very good.
And so, like Bruce, I've already written my paper, but I'm going to go back. You want us to go back and be a little bit more reflective after the process.
I mean, if you got what you got,
Mm-hmm.
and if you want to go back and revisit it, fine. If you want to just tell me what you got from the process, that's valid as well. It's up to you in terms of, don't let this thing eat up too much of your time.
Okay.
I'm not, in the future, if you like to write your reflection before we meet, that way you can go back and compare what you learned to, before and after. Is there any difference from after we've done the sessions? That's a good self-assessment. That doesn't mean you have to change your paper, but that's an excellent self-assessment. Is what were my reflections? What were my takeaways, both before the presentation and then after? That's a good benchmark for you and in your development.
Dr. Lamb, I uploaded the PowerPoint last night to the Dropbox. Will I be able to go back in there to upload the link? Okay.
You will.
Okay.
Yes, you will. There's multiple attempts. It will let you go in and do that. All right. Well, we made it. We made it in less than an hour and a half. We did well the first time. I'm pleased. I'm pleased with your work. It's excellent. I hope that you got something out of this. And as I said, for next week, you're working on your discussion board. Go to where it says discussion board materials, and pick up your document that you need to read, and then go right ahead. Don't let me slow you down. Keep up with your reading. Be prepared for our next meeting. And I will see you. Let's look at the new share. Let's look at this. All right. As I said, next week you've got discussion board 3. We will Zoom again on October 7 at 9 o'clock in the morning. We've said Saturdays at 9. So the next time that I see you will be on Zoom on October 7, and then October 14 and 15 we'll be back on campus. Then fall break, and then another discussion board, and then we'll be back on Zoom on November 4 at 9. Then another discussion board, and then our last face-to-face session on campus, November 18, 19. Then our holiday week comes up, and then your final Zoom session, our final Zoom will be on Saturday, December the 2nd at 9 o'clock. And then final discussion board, and then all work will be due by December 14th. I tried to break it up where we do different things and don't just get stuck on one thing, that we kind of have a break from one and move to the other. Kind of keep it interesting, maybe, somewhat.
For our case study 2, for case study 2, are we keeping the same groups?
That's up to you.
And we're to present case study 2 the same way we did 1.
This is the process.
Okay.
That's why I had all those documents. Generally, what we do, and you don't have to do this. Generally, what we do is I like for you to keep your same groups at least the first 2 times, because the second time you're not going to have near as much help, and you're going to actually have to dig a little more. But you've got some familiarity among yourselves, and you know your work schedules and those kinds of things. You're not going to have all of the goodies that I gave you this time to help you along the way. This was the trial run. This was more about, can you use the technology without hurting yourself, and can you get along? And then next time I'll see more about the work product. It will be more your own than what I have, had you to mirror from that I gave you. And so if it's okay, we can keep the same groups this time, and then we'll talk about changing for the last 2 times. That's generally the way we do it. The first time is kind of a trial run.
Okay.
That
Dr. Lamb, the Blackboard upload is only allowing 1 attempt.
Yeah, it is right now, but after that was to keep you from hurting yourself.
Okay.
I'm going to fix it where you can. I didn't want you uploading things until it was time because I want to make sure. So yes, when I go in today, I will fix the boxes where you will now be able to do this. That was to keep you from using up your boxes from things that then I had to go back and take them out and start again. This keeps me from having to work myself to death. I have folks who get really excited and just start filling up the boxes, but that's okay. That's a good problem to have. But yeah, I will fix the boxes today now that we're ready to roll. That's my next task. All right. Are we through?
I think so.
We did well. We did 82 minutes. We came in 8 minutes under our goal today. Let's make sure we continue to do that. All right. Y'all all have a good weekend, and I'll see you next time.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.